Welcome to the Painting Lines Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things tennis. Join Erik and Aidan in their discussion for updates on news and pop culture, and from hot takes to betting, they've got you covered.
Ready? Play.
Welcome back to Painting Lines. Last week we took a deep dive looking at where the top players in 2022 are now, and this week we'll be recapping Monte Carlo. Aidan, this was pretty ironic. We had two guys who we threw in the slightly regressed category from last week, and they were in the final yesterday.
Oh my God. Yeah, 100%. I definitely got to eat my words on that one just because it really seemed like they were on that path. And then they make this run kind of to me out of nowhere. I mean, I guess Ruud hasn't had that bad of a year so far. He's made a couple of finals, hasn't won any, unfortunately. But it is interesting to look at these guys because I'm really starting to see them as more of clay court specialists because obviously that was their strength before. But looking at them now, it seems like it's just slowly getting more and more extreme, their results on clay versus their results on hard court or other surfaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, guys, if you haven't listened to our episode last week, definitely check it out and you'll know what we're talking about. But I thought it was pretty interesting because I remember last week I also said these guys need a catalyst, something to push them to get them going. I feel like that's exactly what this is. We had Ruud beating Djokovic and then Tsitsipas winning the final. So I think that's pretty good kickstart for both of them, get their careers going back.
Yeah, and Tsitsipas beating Sinner too. So like that's a
Right.
massive win in the semifinal.
Right. May have been a little controversial, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Also, I wanted to say we are now live on Twitter at PL Tennis Pod. Give us a follow. We got some comedy, some news. Like I said, one-stop shop for all things tennis. So check it out.
Yeah, and also on Twitter, you're going to get a little bit more of a live reaction of what our thoughts are in the moment about something versus obviously we're recording the podcast after the tournament's over. So we have a little bit more perspective. Maybe if you want a hotter take, it'll be on Twitter.
Yeah, and we love the interaction too. Like we're going to be posting a lot of questions and, we expect engagement. All right, now let's hop right into Monte Carlo with round one. We had Fritz, the only American in, losing to Musetti 6-4, 6-4.
Yeah. Honestly, that's a pretty disappointing result. As the only American, you're hoping that he does a little bit of representing because Tiafoe and Shelton obviously just finished Houston, weren't going to fly over to Monte Carlo on one day's notice. And then Tommy Paul out with the injury. So
yeah, I know. I'm curious to see how Tiafoe and Shelton would have played in Monte Carlo, like how they would have fared.
Hopefully through round one.
Yeah, I know. Maybe Fritz just should have sat out Monte Carlo, played in the US, but in Houston.
I think you want to play on the biggest stage though, because he's at that level that you would have expected him to get through a couple rounds and be playing against the best guys in the world. And obviously Musetti is a top level talent. Don't want to disregard him, but you expected a little more from Fritz. I think it's the classic kind of Americans not doing that well on clay. And I think the reason, Tiafoe won Houston last year, Shelton won Houston this year, but you don't see them do that well in these bigger European clay tournaments because the rest of the world tends to be have a little bit of a step up.
Right. Yeah. And it's just a much higher caliber of player, 250 versus 1,000.
Exactly.
Anyway, another disappointment, Berrettini coming off his title, losing to Kecmanovic 6-3, 6-1. I think this is a little bit of the post-title hangover where, he's so elated after, he's coming in hot and then just.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what you maybe would have seen. It's why Shelton and Tiafoe didn't play probably. Obviously, yeah. I think Berrettini did play because he was already in, obviously, Northern Africa. And so going to Monte Carlo isn't a massive time shift and it's a little bit more reasonable to get to the tournament. But even then, finishing one tournament and then going immediately into the next one with only a couple days rest is going to be difficult. And I think we saw that here.
Oh yeah. Tennis has to be the quickest turnaround between like winning a title and having to just go back to square one, round one and playing again. Like, come on, at least football, you win a game, you get a week to kind of like let it sit, let it soak in. Baseball, you may get a couple days, but tennis, you're winning a title and then you're flying out the next day and going to play in another tournament. Like you rarely get to celebrate,
Yeah. Like you can be finishing a title on a Sunday and then on Tuesday be playing in a completely different country in the opening round.
Yeah. Tennis is one of those it's like a dopamine hit,
Yeah, exactly.
winning that title. You're up, got to do it again, got to do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then we had all three Brits getting knocked out. So Draper fell to Hurkacz, Evans to Offner, and Norrie to Hatchnow. So is it just British players, British and American, not known for clay?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's just tough matchups for those guys. I wouldn't see it as British guys are bad on clay. I would just kind of see it as they didn't have the best matchups here.
What is it? Correlation does not prove causation, or causation
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
not correlation. It's kind of just so happens that all three British players lose.
Yeah.
And here I am drawing conclusions. But
Exactly. Yeah.
back to the Americans. I thought Korda beating Davidovich Fokina the first round. I had my hopes high. I was thinking, oh, here we go, because Fokina is good. Was a finalist in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely shows that Korda's no slouch on clay, and he knows what he's doing out there. But I mean, it's just tough for him run into that buzzsaw in the second round with Sinner.
Yeah, I know. All right, now let's get into round two. I thought it was pretty routine. We had all the top seeds advance except guess.
I'm gonna go with Rublev.
Yes, Rublev. What is going on here, man?
I don't know. It's really tough for him. I mean, he's lost actually 4 of his last 5 matches. And unfortunately, his only win was over Murray. But even then, like Murray is 36. So I don't think that's that impressive of a win for a guy that's supposed to be top 5 in the world or top 6 right now. He's clearly on a mental slide. But like I've said, when we were looking at Rublev as a player and his patterns, it does seem like he kind of gets into streaks of he's down for a little bit and then all of a sudden it's going to take that upturn and he'll get a few semifinal runs in bigger tournaments. I think he's just on the downturn right now and we'll see him come back later this year.
Yeah, I think so too. He's streaky, but like you said, he's a solid player. So it's only a matter of time. Like, so you got to lose sometimes. It's not like you
Exactly.
can maintain it. So I think we'll see him back. All right, round three. This was one of my favorite, I guess, rivalry. It's not so much of a rivalry, but same generation of guys who were kind of touted to be like the next big thing. So Tsitsipas beats Zverev 7-5, 7-6, which brings their head-to-head record 10-5 in Steph's favor, which I did not see that at all. I thought it was a little tighter.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think it is very surface dependent because if you look at the by surface head to head, Tsitsipas is actually 5-1 on clay versus Zverev. So on hard court, it's 5-4, still in Tsitsipas's favor, but obviously a lot closer of a matchup. And when I saw this, actually, it immediately reminded me of the Nadal Federer head to head because Nadal was 14-2 against Federer when they played on clay. But when they played on grass and hard, Federer actually had the advantage. He was 3-1 against Nadal on grass and 11-9 against him on hard court. So it's interesting when you look at guys and how much clay court can be in one guy's favor versus on other surfaces.
Yeah, I know. And you would think Zverev, he's not bad on clay either.
Yeah, I mean, has a pair of French Open semifinals.
Right, exactly. Wow, that's interesting. That was a good stat. All right, Hachinov beats Medvedev too, and we saw another Medvedev outburst, his second one of the tournament. The first one was against Gale in the round before, but what is going on with this guy? Like that was just so out of pocket. I love his usual antics, but this I felt like was even a step up.
Yeah, I think Medvedev just goes into the clay season with a terrible attitude. He just feels like, I suck at this surface. Nothing goes my way on this surface. And so if anything happens in a match, he's just so prepared to explode about it. And I think that's what happens here is like the smallest thing doesn't go his way, and all of a sudden he's ranting about it.
Yeah, Claydev or Klavedev. I can't take credit for that. I saw that on Twitter. I
Yeah,
thought that was
exactly.
hilarious.
Yeah.
But these antics were kind of warranted, in my opinion.
I mean, we talked about last week that thing that Kyrgios said, oh, this guy should be
with Borges,
fired
right?
with Borges.
Mhm.
And then we come into Monte Carlo, which is a bigger tournament. And immediately we see so many continued terrible calls that had big impacts on the matches.
I know.
And you're like, what is going on? Put the Hawkeye in there so that we don't have these bad calls.
2025, all ATP tournaments.
I mean, that'll be better.
What do they do when they walk over and either like brush it off or cover? Do they underline it or do they just wipe it completely?
Well, no. I think if a player is walking over to the mark, they're trying to signal which mark they're saying it is.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, it was this one. And then the ref
Yeah.
is like, okay, yeah, that ball was out. But I'm like, the player could probably have just circled a different mark that was close, but was out.
Yeah, exactly. The ref will get out of their chair, walk like 10 feet, look at a mark, and make the call.
Yeah,
Like, oh, yeah,
exactly.
no.
You're like, yep, that's what it was.
So you don't think the players ever go over and like wipe it off?
Well, I mean,
Like
didn't
if
we
it's
have that
close, you're like, oh,
controversy? We had
shit.
that controversy, didn't we, last year with Davidovich Fokina versus Runa, where
Oh,
Runa, like, it looked like he walked over and like kicked the spot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
So,
mean, that's kind of within the rules, right? Or there's no rule against it.
other than like unsportsmanlike conduct, probably.
Yeah, I guess that's subjective though.
Yeah, very subjective.
All right, and then we have Ruud beating Hurkacz in 2 sets, which I was pretty surprised about because I feel like if it was on a hard court, the results would be completely flipped. I think Hurkacz would have beat Ruud in two, just because of the way the different styles of play, like where Hurkacz is aggressive to the net and Ruud's just so far back.
I think it's definitely just showing that Ruud is a clay
Mhm.
specialist. Like,
Exactly.
if you look at his results in general, right now, based on maybe the last year or so, he feels kind of like a top 20 player on the hard court. So, like, still a solid player that will do well in tournaments, but doesn't necessarily win them. But he feels more like a top 5 player on clay. And I'd say probably a similar thing with Tsitsipas too.
Yeah, I just feel like because Ruud's starting to play more like a counterpuncher, and that's working on clay where he can be defensive and then take his chances when he needs to. But yeah, I mean, the clay court specialist is an honor, I would say, to be one because it's kind of like you're a guy that people start to fear once they see you in a draw.
Yeah. But then another great match from this round was the other
Scandinavian.
Scandinavian. I couldn't think of that word. It was the other Scandinavian up
Yeah,
against
the Dane.
Dimitrov, Runa versus Dimitrov. So this was a really tight match, and I was really bummed about it, to be honest. I think this was probably the match of the tournament that me and you were on the most opposite sides of rooting for, because I really wanted Dimitrov to win, and he even had a match point, but couldn't get it done in the end.
Yeah, Runa is too clutch. That's what I'm saying, man. It's funny. You like all the old players.
Well, I mean, it's because
like all the
I've
old
watched
guys,
tennis
man.
for a long time. And so
Mm,
I like to see the guys that I watched when I was younger see success. So it's like when I see a guy like Dimitrov, who I've watched
mhm.
for however long it is, like 10 years, and he's playing against Runa, who I've watched for 3 years, I'm going to root for the guy that I have more of like a connection to in terms of watching him.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I like the young guns, the fresh blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I felt like two guys that were kind of under the radar or like slash sleepers, Deminar and Humbert. They just they keep winning, these two guys. Deminar beating his fellow countryman Poprin, and then Humbert with a win against Sonigo. That's pretty impressive. You know, Sonigo is also no joke on clay.
100%. And I think Humbert definitely backed up like that top 15 ranking. Like I was talking about in the past, Humbert really to like stay in that top level, all you have to do is represent your ranking. And he did more than that. He made the top 8 and he's ranked within the top 15. So if he continues to do that, he's going to continue to probably go up in the rankings. Obviously, I think there's a point where you have to be winning tournaments to keep going up, but he backed up what he was expected to do. He was top 15 and he made it to the quarterfinals. So I think great job from him. But like we said, kind of flies under the radar because I think if he made it through one more round, he would have been seen as like, oh, this is a great run. But making it to the quarters, I think, was still very solid from him.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of a bold prediction here. Do you think that he'll crack the top 10 this season?
I think if he keeps representing his ranking like this, he definitely can. Because if he keeps playing it in the biggest tournaments and just collecting points, he doesn't even have to. He's already won a couple of tournaments this year. He doesn't even have to win anymore to keep going up, because there are other guys I feel that have been playing a lot less consistent than he has. And up to a certain point, just having consistent good results will get you in the top 10. That's really why I think Dimitrov is there. I mean, Dimitrov has a couple big results. He made the Paris final and he made the Miami final. But outside of that, he's still been playing very solid in almost every tournament he's played in.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. How about the quarters?
Yeah. We had some big matchups in the quarterfinals where Djokovic, Ruud, and Tsitsipas all made it through. But I think the highlight match of this round was really Sinner beating Rune. That was really a tight 3-set match. What did you think about it?
I mean, I thought that unsportsmanlike conduct call was ridiculous. Like, come on.
100%. I mean, I feel like him doing that is 10 times better than him yelling at the crowd. And half the time when someone yells at the crowd, they still don't get an unsportsmanlike conduct call. So the fact that he got it for just making a hand motion that isn't even like, it's not like he flipped off the crowd.
No.
He just made like a little hand motion to be like, hey, stop talking. And I think what you're seeing now is almost a repercussion of previous actions from Rune, where in the past, he's kind of built this a little bit of a perception that he isn't the most sportsmanlike player. And so an umpire is more quickly going to call him for something like that. Like if you saw Federer doing that, he would never have gotten called for it because they would have just been so shocked that he was doing it. But because Rune has this perception of like, oh, this guy's sometimes not the most kind to the crowd, he's going to get the call against him.
I think you nailed it. You took the words right out of my mouth. He's under a microscope. I feel like he's just scrutinized for everything he does. And because he has that reputation, he's going to get called for it. And when you were saying people yelling at the crowd and doing other things without getting punished, were you alluding to Djokovic? Because he literally told someone to shut the F up in that tournament. He did his little orchestrating to the crowds when they were booing him and nothing. So I thought this was a little ridiculous.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a double standard to an extent. It's so ambiguous what is unsportsmanlike conduct. I feel like this was just didn't qualify really.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty funny. There was another instance earlier where Herkoch did something and the referee called an unsportsmanlike conduct, and Herkoch was like, What are you talking about? And he goes, I feel like you just took out your frustration from the previous point. Herkoch is like, what are you, a psychologist?
Dude, yeah. Oh, I
so
felt like
funny.
I could read your mind.
Yeah, I know. Like, come on, what's with these refs, man?
It's just insane.
All right, we could talk about this for hours though, but let's jump into the semis.
Yeah, so the semifinals, upset Central, the 1 and 2 seeds got knocked out of the tournament. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, that was pretty funny because I kind of had a gut feeling before and I was gonna post it. I know hindsight's 2020, but I was like, I think I'm going with the underdogs this time. And then I didn't want to look like an idiot, so I didn't post it. And sure enough, the underdogs won.
Yeah. I feel like that's one of those times where you got to just go for it and be like, hey, I'm going for Tsitsipas here. Because really there's no downside. There's no big downside if you're wrong. It's like the guy that was expected to win won. You're like, I thought he wasn't going to. But it's like if you do call it, then you look like a genius.
Yeah, well, I think the crazier thing was Tsitsipas beating Sinner more than Ruud beating Djokovic because I thought Sinner was like easily the top player of this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you look at how he's been playing this year. He has one loss coming into this match.
Exactly.
He's made this semifinal of like every tournament he's played in. So just crazy that Tsitsipas, who hasn't been playing as well, is able to beat him in this match, but had some controversial moments.
Yeah, I think he kind of got screwed, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those. It wasn't even close either. That ball was probably 2 inches out on the second serve, and that was on break point. Center had break point. He was up 3-1, so he would have went up 4-1. He loses that game, and then he starts cramping, and then he loses the match.
Yeah.
Like, that is the most consequential calls probably in the last few years.
Yeah, and that momentum is so massive there. Just lose the point, cramp. All of a sudden, not only do you feel bad, you're also a lot closer than you would have been.
Yeah, and I got to say, I think he handled it very well. In the moment, he kind of just walked over to the mark and then stuck up his hand as if he was like showing the ref, like, hey, it was clearly out. But he didn't overreact. He didn't yell. He didn't throw his racket. And then after in the press conference, he just kind of owned it. He was like, yeah, it's unfortunate. It's one of those things. I can't go back and fix it. It happened already. And yeah, it affected the outcome of the match, but can't do anything about it. Just got to move on. I think that was very mature.
100%. One thing I actually read, I was looking at comments about that, and one person said, the biggest thing I've ever learned in tennis is you don't play where the ball lands, you play the call. which I think is a good mindset to be in.
Yeah, it's always interesting, kind of in the like pickup or rec. For example, I was playing yesterday and I hit a serve and I'm almost positive it was a let, but the person I was playing against never called the let and we kind of played the point, but I was just kind of like, after I was, yo, that was a let. But then again, it's his call, right? It's not for me to say.
Yeah, I mean, like 100%. There are sometimes you think you hit your serve out and they return it and you're like, wasn't my serve out? And you're
Yeah.
like, nope. And you
Yeah.
just
And then you
lost the
just kind
point.
of like, yeah, you don't really play the rest of the point as if you're trying, like, all right,
Yeah.
well, this is
You're more confused.
I'm playing on lost time or something.
Exactly.
But Ruud getting his biggest win of his career against Djokovic.
Yeah, I saw something that said this was his first top 3 win, which is crazy given the fact that he's been in the top 3, that he's never beaten the top 3 guy.
Yeah, and I mean his first time beating Djokovic. I think it's his first time actually winning a set off Djokovic too.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so he's 1-5.
I think that Djokovic just doesn't look as dominant this year as obviously he did in the past. Australian Open, he was winning matches, but didn't look, there wasn't as much of a separation between him and the people that he was beating as it felt like in previous years. And then obviously loses to Sinner and then loses to Ruud here. He's still playing at such an elite level that he's only losing to the very best. So he's not losing that many bad matches. He obviously has one, but in general, he only really loses to the guys that are like the best on those surfaces.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is weird that it's mid-April and Djokovic does not have a title.
Yeah.
And I feel like people are quick to kind of, really fixate on his downfall. Like, oh, it's the end of Djokovic, or you saw it. But he said it himself, and you even said it right now. Like, he's made it to the semis in Australia. He's made it to the semis here. He's still having a good year, better than most players, but it's not what's expected of him.
Yeah, it's so funny how the goalposts always move, whoever the player is.
Yeah.
It's why it's always like that classic saying, it's me against me.
Mm-hmm.
It's because you only compare a player to their past. We said that Ruud and Tsitsipas weren't playing well this year or haven't been playing as well the past year. If you look at their years and just got rid of their name, you'd be like, these players are playing excellent tennis. But when you compare them to their past, it's not quite as good. Same thing with Djokovic here. This would be a career year for a lot of players.
Mm-hmm.
Making the semifinal in a Grand Slam, then making the semifinal in a Masters 1000. Those are career accomplishments for a lot of players. But when you look at Djokovic, you're expecting so much from him that these look like failures and like he's completely falling off a cliff in terms of his playing ability.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are quick to write him off, me being one of them actually earlier in the year. But I feel like now that the media is doing it, I like to go against what everyone else is saying. And I do think a lot of good will come from this. I think we're going to see like a Djokovic revenge tour where he's going to take all this, pent up energy and just go ham next tournament.
Is it going to happen in the Olympics?
If it doesn't, it's going to happen event like this year eventually, whether it's in a slam or the Olympics. But it reminded me of the Tim Tebow. Remember when he lost against Ole Miss? It was the only loss of the season. And he gave that press conference. And he was like, I know a lot of good will come from this. You will never see anyone work as hard as I will. You will never see anyone push the team as far as I'm going to push them. Man, I'm getting the chills just thinking about it. But that's what I think is going to happen with Djokovic. I think all this negative energy is going to get harvested to something great and he's just going to pop off. And when he does win, you're going to see that passion that you saw in Cincinnati where he ripped his shirt in half.
Yeah, I think we're just going to see how he fares in his battle against Father Time, though, because he can have as much motivation as he wants. At some point, time's going to catch up with him.
Mm-hmm. All right, the final. So I like to call this the Battle of the Prodigal Sons because they're both coached by their fathers. Both were lost for a bit, but now they were found. They made their way home. They're in a title competing. Dude, run me through this final. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, going into the match, I was pretty split on who I wanted. I didn't really care that much. I probably wanted Ruud a little bit more just because it would have been his first title. And when I say his first title, not just Masters 1000, but would have been his first title at anything bigger than an ATP 250, which I thought is actually crazy. Like this guy's played in multiple Grand Slam finals, now multiple Masters 1000 finals, a few ATP 500 finals. and has never won anything bigger than a 250. So would have been his biggest title, but obviously didn't seem to be going his way, especially in that first set, right?
Yeah, well, so he was 0 for 7 in anything above a 250 final,
Yeah.
which is nuts. But yeah, he got manhandled in the first set, 6-1. Thought Tsitsipas played aggressively. He took risks. You saw his backhand was on fire. He was ripping shots down the line. He was painting lines, no pun intended. But I feel like a lot of the points kind of repeated themselves, at least the sequences. It was big Tsitsipas forehand, Ruud playing defense, having to lob it up, and then Tsitsipas coming to the net and hitting a smash. I just felt like I kept seeing that over and over again.
Yeah, I think Ruud was playing very much like, I'm going to make you beat me. You're going to have to go for aggressive shots and not the highest percentage of shots. But at the highest level, you can't always do that because against someone like Tsitsipas on this day, he's going to make those lower percentage shots and he's going to beat you pretty badly.
Yeah, he also took advantage of the deep court positioning by Ruud. He actually didn't utilize the serve and volley much in that first set, but then just kind of jumped on it in the second. And I think that's where his, I guess, strategy, his tactical genius is like being able to throw in the serve and volley just kind of here and there and use it as a weapon and not be too predictable about it.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, for these two guys, both back into the top 10. So pretty good move for them. I think obviously, if we're going to talk about whether or not it was a disappointment for Ruud, I'm still in the camp that it was a disappointment for him because he made the final for another time, another big final, and he didn't get it done. So I think he's probably just in his head a little bit about it at this point. And I think that could have probably played into how he went into the match in terms of his strategy. Like I was talking about, it seemed like he wasn't going for as many big shots. And that could have been from the nerves of, oh, I don't want to miss a lot of balls in this big final. Mm-hmm. But at that level, you have to be willing to go for those risks.
Yeah, I think you can definitely see the nerves in his forehand. You know, he was hitting balls into the net, and then when he was trying to loosen up and hit winners, he was hitting them deep. He just couldn't really find a rhythm. But I think it was a success. I think this tournament, he beat Djokovic and he made it to the finals, and that's good for him.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of like Dimitrov in Miami, where the semifinal win is a massive success, but the final loss takes a lot away from that.
Yeah. All right. Should we hop into segments?
Yeah, let's hop into segments. So what's new in tennis? What'd you see this week?
All right. Well, this is bad news. Alcaraz is unable to defend his title in Barcelona. He pulled out again. He's still got that nagging forearm injury. And it's a bummer because not only was he defending his title, but he's two-time champion. So he won the last 2 years. This would have been for the hat trick, like 3 in a row, where Tsitsipas, he has the hat trick in Monte Carlo, but it wasn't 3 in a row. I think 3 in a row is pretty damn impressive. And with Alcaraz out, we have someone else taking his place. So Fabian Marozsan, aka the Hungarian headhunter, moves from the round of 64 to the round of 32. Feel like, there's going to be a mixed camp. There's going to be some players that are sighing relief because Alcaraz is not in. But then again, you got the headhunter in there who's coming for heads and is going to upset someone. I'm calling it right now.
Yeah, whoever he plays in like that later round.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, God damn it.
Someone's got to be careful. But I think Alcaraz is doing the right thing here. No need to push an injury. If it is as bad as it is, it could just turn into a nagging, lingering injury. So good for him. Get rest. Do what you need to do. Get better because we don't want to see you out for longer.
100%. But it does mean that probably Sinner's going to be holding on to that number 2 ranking now because it could have been that he fell back from there, but with Alcaraz not being able to defend his title, he's just going to lose some more points and drop further away from him.
Yeah, good point. What did you see in the news this week?
Well, I made a post on Twitter about it actually earlier in the week, but now it's actually official as the rankings came out today. With Fritz's early exit in Monte Carlo, Shelton actually moves up past him to number 14. Fritz drops down behind him, and Shelton becomes the number 1 American. So obviously that's a career accomplishment. Like he's the best in the country, but I honestly didn't see it coming. I thought based on how the year was going so far, I thought Tommy Paul was more likely than Shelton actually to get up to that ranking as recently as like a month ago when Tommy Paul won in Dallas. But obviously since then he's gotten injured and Shelton wins this big title in Houston. So it's trended a little differently since I thought that. But Fritz with the first round exits in Miami and Monte Carlo really just dropped him down, and that's why he's no longer the top American.
Yeah, it's so funny that Fritz and Paul just put it, and even Tiafa like put in all this work. I feel like years and years. Not to say Shelton did it, but he just came onto the scene and exploded so quickly. Like it's just kind of, I wonder if he even feels like imposter syndrome almost. Like he's the top American without really. I'm not gonna say he didn't accomplish much, but I feel like Fritz is just a much more accomplished player.
Well, I think the thing about it is, who do you feel is the biggest Grand Slam threat of the Americans right now? It's Shelton.
Ben. Yeah, it's Ben.
And if you're going based on that, if the rankings are about really who's the biggest threat at the biggest tournaments, this is a reasonable thing to see.
Yeah, it's just career-wise accomplishments. You build them up, and then
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it's all about the ranking.
100%. Alrighty, you ready to move into bet of the week?
Yeah, betting. I was pretty tempted to be a degenerate and take Kaboli plus 320 against Nadal. I feel like Nadal's first match back, this could be a good bet, but it's not my bet of the week. My bet of the week is a triple leg parlay.
Oh my God.
So to start
really
things
going
off,
for the degenerate bet.
yeah, I know, right? We got Nori over Mayo, Tsitsipas over Offner, and Ruud over Mula for minus 190. So I scanned the lines this week. I didn't really like a whole lot. I didn't really like what I saw. So I just took 3 overwhelming favorites and parlayed them together to get better odds. Hopefully it works out.
I just feel like that's so much risk for those
Mhm.
3 guys. That's not a bet I would necessarily go for, but I can see why you went for it.
Yeah, I'm nervous about Nori.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we could see any of those guys. Like obviously Ruud and Tsitsipas
Mhm.
just had a long week. We've talked about the hangover you can have from that long week. Obviously still favorites, but anything can happen. And I think any of those matches. And so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Who are you taking this week?
I'm going with Altmaier plus 150 over Popperin. My reasoning for this is Altmaier, we've seen he has a high peak level on clay because he beat Sinner at the French last year. And I don't think his clay season so far has been representative of his actual level. He lost to Martinez and Estoril, which looks like a really bad loss at the time, but Martinez went on to make the final. So he was obviously in great form that tournament. And then he lost to Echeverry in Monte Carlo, who is also a very solid clay player. So these aren't that bad of losses. And I think him having positive odds is worth it. Popperin, good player, good serve, but I think Altmaier may get it done, especially on the clay surface.
Yeah, I like that. Good stuff. All right, match of the week. So I kind of went for a sleeper. I didn't really go for like a big match, but I saw Struff beating Baez in 3 sets, and I thought that was a great match because I think it's pretty impressive for Struff, considering Baez is a good clay player and he's actually ranked 10 spots higher than him, or almost 10, which I thought was a little surprising. But anyway, Struff loses the first set 1-6 and ended it on a double fault. So you'd have think, all right, this match is over. Any momentum this guy had is completely gone, but flipped it. Second set was tight, went to a tiebreaker, won the tiebreak, took it into a third set, won the third set. And I was going to say that this would be another point to my hypothesis that whoever wins the second set tiebreaker wins the match because of momentum. But I was looking at some scores from this tournament and was quickly debunked by the Sinner Runa match.
Yeah. I think this is definitely an impressive win, especially because Baez has been playing great this year. So a big win for Struff. And yeah, 100%. When you lose a first set and it's that one-sided and you lose on a double fault, you've got to be so in your head. My guess is what Struff decided was he was like, hey, I'm just going to focus on holding my serve. And he gets to the tiebreak, then he wins it. And now all of a sudden he has the momentum back, really.
Yeah, the Struff waffle, baby. What was your match
up with
of the
that
week?
nickname?
Yeah, so have you ever had a Stroop waffle?
No, I know where it's from.
Oh,
I just
okay,
was
yeah.
wondering if you came up
Oh,
with
yeah, I came up with that. At least as far as I know, I came up with it. I never
Yeah.
heard it from anyone else.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's why I was like, I've never heard him be
Yeah.
called that, but
Those
yeah,
things are delicious.
yeah, got like the little syrup in the middle.
Yes. Oh my God. I
You
actually had
don't
a
get them on the planes.
Yeah, you get them on the planes, and then I actually had one in Austria too. Austria,
Nice.
delicious. All right, back to tennis.
Yeah. So my match of the week was Rune versus Dimitrov. Rune won 7-6, 3-6, 7-6. Obviously, we talked about it a little bit, but what really bummed me out about this match was the fact that Grigor did have a match point at 6-5 in the third set. And I think any match where you have a match point and don't win the match has got to be just one of the worst feelings in the world. But still, it was a really tight, intense match, and Rune just outplayed him, I think.
Mm-hmm. How much of Runa's, I guess, like off the court kind of attitude and actions impacted Dimitrov? Like, do you think Dimitrov was getting distracted by all the stuff Runa was doing?
I think what distracted him was the fact that Rune was just wearing this super bright yellow. I honestly like the look, though. I think it's pretty sick. But
yeah, I don't.
I don't know how much the antics impacted him, but probably a little bit. I mean, to an extent, I think that's one of the benefits of being like a Kyrgios. Kyrgios definitely gets in other people's head, even when he's going off on himself.
Yeah.
He can probably make his opponent feel overconfident, like Kyrgios is imploding. And Kyrgios does it so much that he'll be yelling at his box probably and not be imploding at all.
Yeah, I know. And I feel like it impacts the older players more too. Like you had Stan, remember he got pretty spicy with Runa last year. And I don't know, maybe I'm just generalizing the older players and grouping them together, but I'm just imagining Dimitrov getting kind of like pissed off, like, oh, this young kid on the tour doesn't know how to act.
I think it's just like, well, the longer you've been on the tour, the more you hope for professionalism from your opponents.
Exactly.
And so when you play someone that is a little bit immature, whether it's Rune, whether it's like Kyrgios, someone that's just yelling all the time, you're going to be like, hey, dude, like, don't be yelling and being like angry at the spectators. We make money because they come. Don't be angry. But the funny thing is, like, people want to see someone like Rune or Kyrgios. I keep using Kyrgios because I can't think of another one off the top of my head. But I see people want to see those guys play because of how wild they are and almost eccentric.
Yeah, speaking of that, I actually went to my first college tennis match this weekend, Cornell versus Harvard match, and you see it every single point. The player just over, like, even if it's just a regular point, they scream, the fans scream, they get into it. And so I can see it makes sense why Ben Shelton acts the way he does. Like, it makes total sense now.
And that's why
he's just used to it.
Rohan was so into it too.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.